So let me get through the introduction, because Justin and I know each other fairly well, but you may not know Justin. We've worked together a couple of times, both on different, usually sharing clients. But he's the founder over at Salesborgs. He's a neuroscience-based, hyper tactical outbound. I don't know. I was gonna say monster. Monster is not the right word. I was gonna say evil genius, in a kind way, in a loving way. But you've been at a number of top tier VC backed SaaS firms. You've been at the head of a number of very large revenue sales development teams. You are part human, part machine, and you've automated millions of messages. You've done some crazy stuff. So I'm excited because I pick up something new every time we talk to you. And this is actually the second time we're going to be talking about combo prospecting. So I'd love maybe a little background on the combo prospecting. Fill us in. Anything I missed on the cyborgs, on the Justin Michael experience?
I love it. So, welcome back. And yeah, I have an incredible relationship with the country of Canada. Perfect track record. So, got to get back to Vancouver. Excited to be here. And who am I? I'm a futurist. There's actually a guy named David Shingy, and he worked for AOL and legendarily got paid, I think, $1 million to prognosticate about the future of digital technology. And his title was Digital Prophet. I found out about this guy 15 years ago. He dresses like Bono. He has like huge hair and the glasses. And I'm like, this is what I need to do with my life, is become a futurist. It's not how I make a living. You guessed it, but I am a futurist for 10 bound and vendor neutral. And I, self-proclaimed. And so I make a lot of predictions about sales tech. I used to work for Salesforce Marketing Cloud and LinkedIn. I once worked directly for Sean Parker. You know him from, he introduced Mark Zuckerberg to Peter Thiel and is in the movie The Social Network, played by Justin Timberlake. And also, The Social Dilemma, or whatever the new movie is. So he started Napster. I've had some cool high profile experiences. My most fun client was Mark Wahlberg. I was a huge Marky Mark fan. I used to rollerblade in 1992 to Good Vibrations. So that makes me cool enough almost to be a Canadian, right? A little humor here to start. I can't hear anyone laughing, but I'm a futurist, and I built a society called Salesborgs.ai. And the whole idea of my work has been sellers and cyborgs. If artificial intelligence is coming for our jobs, if machine learning is going to automate our jobs, we have an existential crisis to figure out, how are we going to play into the self-driving Uber, right? What are we going to do sitting there while the car is driving itself? What is the role of the seller of the future? So yes, I was a case study in a book called Combo Prospecting, which you can find at comboprospecting.com. My mentor is Tony J. Hughes. And that was really about blended combinations and techniques. I used to run sales development teams in San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Berlin, even as far as Gangnam in South Korea. And, basically did business development all over the world. About 5 years ago, I was approached by some VCs to do this full time for 100 concurrent startups in this ambitious startup called Outbound Works. And we tried to automate every facet of sales development. Personalization at scale. We were doing sentences at scale. We were doing really crazy technographics, psychographics, all this stuff. So recently I was approached to do a book, and I thought, what on earth can I write about sales that will stand the test of time? And so the first thing I want to talk about today is technology quotient. And it's also been called AQ, or adaptability quotient. And basically, it's our ability to fuse with machines. So my meta background is, I actually was really into Photoshop in my teens, and ended up studying at UCSB and got an award for Photoshop. I also was involved in the music business. So I used to do a lot of production and recording. For those of you out there familiar, systems like Pro Tools and Logic and Reason. And so I dealt with a lot of advanced user interfaces, UX and UI and hardware. It was really hard to use. So when I got into the environment of like Groove and Yesware and ToutApp and Outreach.io and SalesLoft, I mean, it was all pretty usable, because for 15 years in SaaS companies, after the high profile ones I talked about, I went into mobile advertising technology. So I was talking to Steve Richard, and we kind of had to identify what is this meta skill that no matter how many times the platforms change, if I write this book and you learn this stuff, you can stay ahead of it. How do you learn how to learn? And it's technology quotient. So we developed this site, and it was the founder of Rev Garage, Julian Imchinsky, who helped with the vision and to bring this to life. So I'm super grateful. If you go to salesborgs.ai, and the central theme is a TQ test, which is right. Who am I to create the test? We got some leaders involved, some professors, scholars, engineers, neuroscientists, people who are actually not just smarter than me, but accredited. And we developed a series of games and exercises, and think of it like Lumosity for salespeople. And so it's a lot of fun. Any questions so far on that, Colin? Have I sounded insane? I'm just dialing in.
I mean, you're always a little bit out there, which I love about you. Bruce did have a question though. It's in the gain acknowledgement that they have a problem needs to convey intent to listen and understand without being tied to outcome. Please comment on gently conveying this intent.
Like when I'm doing prospecting, how do I convey intent? Can you translate this? Are you talking about like the detachment when I'm doing prospecting? Can you phrase that? Can I call a lifeline?
Yeah. Maybe I'll ask Bruce, because if I'm being completely honest, I stepped out for a little bio break, and then I came back in and I was reading this and I was like,
I have no idea what just happened.
I'm actually a human. I'm not a robot. I did need to. So Bruce, if you could help translate and clarify, I'll bring it back to Justin here.
Good. I'll switch slides here. But yeah, let me answer Bruce's question. I wonder if he's talking about intent data. Hit me. Who wants to be a millionaire? I've been put on the hot seat immediately in my presentation. Did he write back?
He said, thanks, we're fishing buds and robo buds.
Oh, yes.
Bruce Kirk.
Bruce Kirk. Okay, cool. He's awesome. Everyone follow Bruce Captain Kirk. He came on my podcast. He has some great sales applications and angles. That's the thing about me. You've got to study every generation of selling and every type of method and blend it into your own amalgam. Can I answer his question? Do you understand what it is, Colin?
I'm not quite there yet, but okay. Bruce, we'll come back to you. We'll come back to Bruce, and Bruce, if you can help.
We'll come back to you, Bruce.
If you can clarify your message in chat, I will get it back to Justin.
I'm Casey Kasem, and this is the Beatles. Okay, visual processing at 60 times. So basically the brain, I became obsessed with neuroscience because I was really into the work of Dr. Cialdini. Dr. Robert Cialdini, I was thinking like the Alan Parsons Project. Essentially, he wrote this book called Persuasion. Many of you may be familiar with it. The brain, when it looks at an image, it's 60,000 times the speed of processing. So I figured out that like email is actually a visual medium. What your brain is doing when it's looking at symbols and fonts is it's translating it into an image. And like when you're reading at night and you get tired, you can go outside and you can see the trees and the stars and you can still drive your car. But sometimes you're just, really struggling with the text. And then just to learn to read or to learn another language is very difficult. So what I decided to do, like I just thought of like tombstone epiphanies. One is email traditionally in B2B for 20 years has been about templates and words. So I flipped this. I show people email systems that are visual. How? You're going to get caught in the spam folder. We'll talk about that. Why? Because if I show someone this Venn diagram right here, shameless plug, I have a ton of respect for all these folks. Do I have predictable revenue on here? I should. That's going to unlock.
Presentation's over. Presentation's over. Get out of here.
I'm out. That's it. Get the hook. This image is going to unlock at like 60,000 times faster. So it's always 5 to 12 touches, 20 touches. I started sending people Venn diagrams like the one on the left. And when I say people, chief product officers, chief digital officers. So I sent one of these to the CDO of McDonald's. And on the first email, I got a meeting. Then I sent it to the VP of mobile of Home Depot. And from my signature, which was insane, from my signature, he called me. And it was like a flux capacitor. I felt like Doc Brown because someone called me back from an email in the signature without me even asking. He says, pitch me. So I'm sitting there pitching the VP of mobile. What's crazy is I went after that VP of mobile for 5 years with cold calls, with digital, with everything. So this was my breakthrough. And then I was like, okay, if email is visual, then what is phone from a neuroscience perspective? Let me make sure I caught this. So we should be using visual elements. We need to think like a product marketer. And this also is really good tidbit. 90% of the information transmitted to the brain is visual. So if you really look at any website, you see product marketing, Venn diagrams, quadrants, G2, everything's visual. And then we get into email and we have these long 3-paragraph emails. That takes the brain 13 seconds to F-track scan it. 3-sentence emails take 3.3 seconds. To get past the spam filter, you just put the visuals in the second or third touch out of Outreach or Sales Loft or Ring DNA or Zant. And thank you, all the SCPs. That's what we're trying to do. Now, you can also build GIFs. So if you look in product marketing, you go to the top websites, they always have like a little GIF that's moving with the aha moment. So I nest those into my sequences because think of how much it's unlocking. Everyone's trying to use the same descriptions to describe the CRM systems. But what if you have this amazing feature of integration? What if you can show that and then put that in the email? Okay, before we get into this, can we go back to Bruce's question?
Bruce is gone radio silent on me. So
Bruce is giving us the silent treatment. That's okay.
Cold shoulder.
Intent, use intent data, curiosity, truly want to help the customer. There's a lot of ways I can go off that one. We'll go back to Bruce on that live on LinkedIn. Is this where we are? Polarity shifting. Yeah. So what is polarity? This is really wild. So I'm really into electromagnetics and science. And my grandfather was actually a nuclear physicist. So I always just joke that I'm, wasting my gray matter in B2B. And B2B is ripe for disruption. Actually, sales tech and tools are going to get billions in investment. We just saw the rounds from Gong and from Outreach. But I look a lot at the phone now and say, well, what's happening with the brain? Now, I'm an armchair neuroscience. I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not trained. I read Dave Hoffeld's book. I study psychology and emotional intelligence and neurolinguistic programming. And I just, I actually feel like Todd Capone, who was my trainer at Salesforce, is doing kind of the most, egghead work of going into old, documents and scholarly articles and really diving into this stuff. And I have a lot of respect for what he's doing. But for me, I'm just sitting in my armchair and thinking about the brain. So what's the phone? The phone is about tone. And for the last 20 years, I've been in sales. Power pose, stand up straight, wear a tie, be confident, right? Well, that didn't work for me, which is weird. So what I actually realized that the phone work is about active listening and it's about power transfer. It's about polarity. You can only control someone by getting them to talk. And the more that you're listening actively, the more you're controlling. It's like Aikido. So if email is about visual, calling is about power transfer and polarity. And this came about, I would work on these giant deals for 6 months, even up to 2 or 3 years across companies. And there was this moment where the back wheel, like the tires in the quicksand, they start to get traction, where the customer starts pushing the deal. I'm not pushing it. Well, I found this same polarity shift on first calls, that if I could get people to talk and I could ask open spin questions from the front of the call, I developed this framework called Route, Ruin, Multiply. I would have initial calls where I would close the entire deal on the first call. This was happening in 2007. I would call, I was working for a SaaS company, I'd call all these companies and every single one was not interested. So I started a Jedi mind trick. I'm like, what could I possibly say to keep this person on the phone? And the weirdest script that I came up with is, who's in charge of your blank? So I'd confirm their name. And if they were the head of mobile, I'd say, well, who's in charge of your mobile? And it was the damnedest thing. They'd say, oh, I do the web. I don't do that anymore. Oh, it says that on my LinkedIn. That's actually Marjorie, so, and then instead of trying to convince them why their internal solution or the competitor is bad, I would validate them and ask all these open questions. So I wasn't using scripts and rebuttals, and I'm having the prospect talk 95% of the time. And the reason I call this vampire theory is because, sales, we're elevating it, all of us, and with Own Your Growth, but I don't know, it's sort of a used car. I mean, we're like vampires, right? Like they have to let us in over the threshold. And so what I found on first calls is there is a moment when the prospect is interested in the seller, and you have to wait and listen hard enough for that magic moment for the polarity to shift. And so my whole technique is based on generating the interest and the desire, or unlocking the latent pain. Because what I noticed, having done 20,000 hours of cold calls and now listening to thousands of calls for the sales borgs all over the world, is everyone's pitching from the front. Hi, I'm a salesperson, spotlight on me, pitch, pitch, pitch. And that all that can do is cause the prospect to recoil and to subconsciously, like, their mind is triggered like fight or flight, and they start running the other way. Any questions so far on this? I could go forever.
Oh man, this is great. Keep going. I keep thinking that's Nikola Tesla, because you were talking about you were talking about physics and that. I was like, is that Tesla or a vampire?
It's both, actually.
There you go.
If Nikola Tesla were a vampire, that's kind of the training here. No, now I'm just confusing you for pure frivolity. Neuroplasticity. So, what I do is I take adults and teach them how to change themselves and things. And so I love Scott Leese, the addiction model. It's like no one can change in this life until they admit they have a problem, period. And so what you have to do, though, in the brain is you have to change your neuroplasticity. And it can take 18 to 254 days for a person to form a new habit. Now, we all know people that it's going to take 254 days. I'll just be my own laugh track here. But, if you're really going for it, maybe 27 days, 2 weeks. Where I came up with this is there's this myth that only children can learn languages. It's like, well, I didn't have a chance. I wasn't able to learn Chinese because I wasn't 4. But if I had learned early, but then you have like the CIA and like these double agents, and they're learning conversational Romanian in 2 weeks. How? Like Berlitz and Duolingo and Rosetta Stone. So if we can learn the complexity of languages, we can reorganize our synaptic connections. And our brains are like plastic, and we can regroove them through repetition. There's a lot of theories right now about how sales has changed, and we're in this new paradigm of the buyer. It sells marketing software really well. But this version of our brain is actually 40,000 years old and is identical to the version of the brain that buyers had and sellers had 100 years ago. So Todd Caponi is right. My first version of my book was going to be called 1910. And I was going to basically just prove that sales is identical to 1910 because of neuroscience, because it's the same brain on both sides. Any questions there?
You good, man?
I'm good. I haven't provoked anyone yet. Let's try this. So I really love Craig Elias, and guess where he's from? Canada. It's the theme. We're going to work in the Canadian theme. Spent many summers in Victoria, British Columbia, using loonies to buy Diet Coke, going to the Native American Museum, and I've been all through the Butchart Gardens and had tea at the High Empress. I had high tea at the Empress. That sounded really like a sci-fi movie. So trigger events. What's happening in your brain, something called selective awareness. So I love this concept. Everybody right now, literally everybody, is sending mass emails out of sequencers. Name one, whether it's Apollo, Persist IQ, Outreach, Sales Loft. What's happening? Prospects are actually seeing it. They're seeing the emails, and you think they're ignoring you, and they are deleting. But like for me, I don't even spend the time. A ton of people spam me or send me messages, and I just ignore it. Well, what this theory or technique espouses is that basically, if you have a trigger event, like a job change, you change your job, or your supplier messes up, or there's enough awareness, like Gong did a Super Bowl ad. So maybe I finally see Gong logo, but I've been getting the emails for months. Your brain like triggers and starts to become conscious of these emails. So the takeaway here is so much of my methods for prospecting is to have trust, to have faith in the abyss. You're dialing into a black hole. Like I'm just constantly buffeting these prospects in all these hyper relevant ways without any response. But I have trust that because of their selective awareness mentally, that they are seeing it. So the brain is a forgetting machine. Like even right now, as I'm talking, my brain can look out the window right now through peripheral vision. It's insane how much data I'm taking in and then forgetting just to protect myself. So you got to remember that one human brain is still more powerful than every supercomputer strung together on Earth.
Unless I haven't had my coffee in the morning.
I haven't even had coffee. God forbid I came on this webinar with coffee early in the morning. Can you imagine? Um, Heuristics. This is a great Scrabble word if you want to get 50 points. It's also, my brother's a coder. He invented a few divisions at Google. So I always say that like my brother and I are like Danny DeVito and Schwarzenegger and twins, except I'm DeVito mentally, right? Uh, heuristics is this crazy word about overlays. And it's, if you think of Ruby on Rails or Node.js or some of the coding languages, which in my book, I talk about sellers learning to code and to do data science. I actually say in the book that we have to move sellers um, from Excel to SQL to SQL. What this means is these are sweeping generalities. It's not the way you want to talk, but it's true. Everyone's going to HubSpot. They're getting these awesome templates by people like Josh Braun, by Beck Holland. Check it out, learn it. But here's what not to do. Don't use it. Don't even use my stuff. Figure out the heuristic, meaning what is the meta framework? You're writing an email. You do something humorous, humor opener. You then write a bridge. You do social proof. What are the building blocks linguistically of what you're sending versus let's just copy paste from a HubSpot blog? Because the danger is then everyone's using the same templates and then prospects just tune it out because they see that it's automated. So heuristics are like shortcuts to problem solving. They're like overlays. And just think of it as the puzzle pieces of what the languages mean. So if you're looking as text as an image, well, the images are kind of like chess moves through your email. So this is something to keep in mind. This is pretty confusing. Anybody confused, want to raise their hand, ask me a question? Some people have seen this Prezzo before in various forms.
No, I like the building blocks sort of
Okay.
analogy and the
Yeah.
heuristics. Basically, like another word for heuristic is bias, isn't it?
I've never thought of it that way. I've thought of it as like a meta framework or, a building block, but there's a lot that goes into linguistics from tone and intent. And that's why emojis are really powerful. Actually, when everyone went remote, one of the reasons that Slack has so much Unicode. So one of the funniest things about Zoom is there's only 4 emojis, but Unicode has over 3,200 emojis. But when you're actually managing teams remotely, you want to use a ton of emojis. And I learned this 10 years ago because I had a team of 1,000 in 3 countries and I was using Meebo through AIM and Google Plus. If you send someone a message without inflection and emotional tone, they're usually going to read the negative. So if there's any ambivalence about what the text means, add an emoji to soften it. So when I manage people or I'm doing consulting remotely, I'm constantly emojiing because I want to show sarcasm or I want to soften and show warmth. Because if something could come off wrong, I'm using the emotions for the intonation. So this is a huge tip. Use emojis in your prospecting emails.
I love that. I definitely come across as a grump sometimes and or all the time. I've heard it from my entire team and my family that I come across as like, yeah, unintentionally scary. And I'm like, no, I'm actually in a great mood. So I have to absolutely leverage that one. I haven't done it so much in prospecting, but I think that's a phenomenal idea.
I've been called highly eccentric and flowery, and I just don't know how you blend those two. So I just go with that. I go
Yeah,
like, Weird Al Yankovic, yeah, who's serious. I try to play that up, little Carrot Top, little Elon Musk,
there
mix
you
it
go.
in. Left brain, right brain. It turns out this isn't a thing. Again, this is a heuristic. It turns out with advanced neuroscience and study of the brain that it's actually not the left and right hemisphere. I mean, it is true that the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body and the right controls the left. And early studies of the brain showed that the creative side is right and the analytical side is left. But when we were trained at LinkedIn to write, you want to make every communication you have be left brain, right brain. And what it means is if you have a logical argument, you want to have emotion and heart. So if you say 110% revenue growth, that's a dead email. It's only a certain type of prospect will be fully left brain. Maybe a CFO really cares about the bottom line, but people, they get inspired to buy with emotion and they justify with logic. And so just think of this metaphor when you're doing a LinkedIn outreach or you're building prospecting campaigns. So, my system in a nutshell is I make emails look like text messages, dead short. Like it's so short, you're going to send something that you can't even hit the button. Like I'm scared to send this message. Now you're at the Justin Michael method. You're short enough that it's like my CMO is not going to want me to release this. That's good. That means it's going to work. 60% open rate. And then so I did these dead short text message like sequences and cadences. The open rates went up to 80%. But then to get the conversion rate, that's where I use this emotional resonance piece, which the left and right brain, I would tell the story, I would trigger an emotion. And you see this in Sandler, challenged by, frustrated with, tearing their hair out. I call this the Paul Ryan P90X. We never saw Paul Ryan before he did P90X, but he's extremely fit. And so he's obviously doing something. So you can't just send the prospecting email as the outcome. Hey, look, Acme has 117% revenue growth. Don't you want it? It's like, well, what was the before? What was the pain, the fear, the struggle, right? And that's how do you do that then in this micro atomized burst? Any questions on that? And we'll go into persuasion. I still feel like I left Bruce behind. I feel like he's out there wanting to know what's going on.
Maybe my link to the comments is just has been severed, but and I'll double check here. But I'm pretty I haven't heard back from Bruce, so I think he was just in to drop, and now he's yeah.
So a couple books sat on my desk forever. One was the 80-20 Rule by Richard Koch, and another one was Robert Cialdini, Persuasion. And I finally read them both, and they're awesome. And then I weave them into everything I do. Another one is called 22 Immutable Laws of Branding by Al Ries. All three of these books are like meta frameworks into everything I'm building. Basically, Cialdini released this book. It sold millions of copies. It proves out that there's, different types of persuasion. And if you thought about JD Power and Associates, they'd send you a dollar bill, a crisp $1 bill. And it's just like then this brutal long paper survey, but you would always do it because you feel guilty because you have this, beautiful dollar shiny bill. Also, the Hare Krishnas in the airports would bump into you and give you a flower or a little gift. So if you can give, you'll get. And so when I'm writing emails, I give an insight. I do, and there's even technology now like Sendosa where you can send coffee cards and there's a feeling of reciprocity. So when I talk about combo prospecting and leaving the voicemail, always leaving the voicemail, you left a voicemail, the other 200 people didn't. Who do you think is going to get the call back? He tried, she tried, they tried, right? So, then there's something, so that is, I think liking, but it's also commitment and consistency. I have this one prospect email where I say, hey, could you just do me the courtesy of pointing me in the right direction? Or could you just do me the professional courtesy of just getting back to me here? And they want to be consistent and congruent with who they are. And so a lot of times it'll make them respond. Social proof is huge. A very similar customer that you helped in a specific use case. Specificity, I'm huge on. Josh Braun calls this crispiness, which always makes me hungry. Yeah, I'm rarely ever serious. I use a lot of humor in what I do, and I use Seinfeld humor, like, Curb Your Enthusiasm, sort of, I'm the Will Smith of B2B, that's the key. So no one really ever gets offended. Maybe they do, they don't tell me. There's a lot of these. Authority, right? If you can cite Gartner or Forrester, an authority figure, I can keep going. Scarcity, right? If it's a VIP experience, that's how Facebook scaled. I think I got a chat. Wow, I did it. I provoked someone.
No, it's me.
Oh, damn. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to go into some, how are we doing on time, by the way?
We got about 4 minutes until the yoga session with Julia.
Okay. Well, then let me hit the key takeaways and do some questions. So emails should look like text messages. Think about it. What's popular in the world? Facebook Messenger, Instagram, Snap, WhatsApp, text. The brain processes these in 3 seconds. So why would you ever send 3 paragraphs? Everything important happening in this world is going across in real time in short form. Think of your emails as an ad unit. You get 18 words between the subject line and the preview text. So make it count and A/B test everything. Use product marketing, visual diagrams, visual themes to unlock the processing power of the brain. 60,000 times faster, 90% is retained visually. And make sure you are triggering people emotionally, emotional resonance. Another tip I have is if you do 12 touches or 15 touches of sequence, don't link out. Don't link to white papers. Don't ever click out of the sequence, and make sure wherever they are in the clusters and the different touch points that they can understand it. Because a lot of times you don't trigger them until 7 touches. You're trying to figure it out. Any questions here? I probably have time for 2 questions.
Yeah, I'm curious, or so I just wanted to double click on that. I love the piece on not linking out. One from a technical perspective, because adding more links is going to put you into spam. But two, I think, I don't know about you, but maybe I should ask you this question. When you receive sales development email, do you click on any of the links, or do you just turn around and Google the company?
A lot of times I think I just try to find the person on LinkedIn to see, what it is, but I find I mainly receive generic looking emails. So that's another cool thing about Combo is if you carve out your top accounts, and then you actually just write to them like a
Mm.
human, it's pretty powerful. So what I started to do is the biggest hack I had is how can you make what's automated look not automated? That was the genius of Outbound Works. And what we were doing is you couldn't tell that someone hadn't personally written to you. So what I like to do is I like to take one person and write one email, make the grammar funky, misspellings. Like I like to, how the Star Wars movies, like, they did start to look, it was too perfect, the CGI, but now like Rogue One, they've got the
Hmm.
etching and the flaws.
Hmm.
So I actually just write something that looks like a broken text message and then I automate that. I don't think I answered your question.
No, I think that's great. And Eugene just sent me a question asking if you can show us one of your emails that looks like a text message.
Um, you know what? I have shameless plug. Everybody go here, salesborgs.ai. I have two mastermind groups, one on WhatsApp and one on Discord. It's reaching close to 2,000 people, and I have guides from the Justin Michael Method, which is a hilarious name for it. It's like the Alan Parsons Project, but I will send you these guides full of email examples. I call them spears. That's an homage to Aaron Ross. He had spears, nets, and seeds, and spear was the outbound techniques. I just called it spear because it's compact. It's so short. Your CMO won't let you send it. When marketing won't let you send the email, you're ready. That's my key.
Uh, Last question on from Tamara. Do emojis affect deliverability?
Everything impacts deliverability, including the word revenue, which is a spam catch now.
Mm.
The sophistication of the whitelisting of domains and the algorithms that are capturing, and Google's sophistication of spam algorithm are wild. I have a couple different write-ups with checklists to make sure all this stuff works. So if you're interested, reach out to me, salesborgs.ai, take the TQ test. You don't want to be heavy emojis in the first email because it's kind of a spam gate and an aperture. So first the spammer looks to see if they even open it and click on it. So you want to be like text only for the first two emails and then get into stuff. An emoji or two, it won't hurt you. But my first message, I even started to remove the HTML. So there's actually a setting hard coded in Outreach where you can remove the opt-out link and you can remove it. Every email is two emails. It sends text only and then it sends an HTML version, and you can turn that all off. And you might not have
Mhm.
admin setting. But I'm still GDPR compliant. So I still say, hey, if you want to be off the list. So I just add that manually. And then if you're in Canada, you're out of luck because you need permission in Canada. So use LinkedIn.
It's a very polite culture up here.
Castle.
You got it. Justin, thank you so much for joining us today. We've got yoga break coming up with Julia. If you'd like to hang
Okay.
out, you're more
Thanks
than
for having
welcome.
me. Had a
Appreciate
blast.
it. Always a good time getting a chance to chat to you, buddy.
Thanks.